Today, women are making more money and having more impact than ever before. With that power and opportunity comes responsibility. Unfortunately, we have not been taught how to make the most of these assets and opportunities, so many women today are still dying in poverty after a lifetime of success. Lifestyle Architect is a series of training videos that cover everything related to investing, from the philosophical to the tactical. Each month, we pick a theme and then discuss the related investment vehicles, how to incorporate them into your investment portfolio, and the tips and techniques to get them working the hardest for you. Wealthy Wise Women is a community of independent women who are sharing a journey of discovery and growth toward financial freedom. The Lifestyle Architect recordings are based on Susan's experiences and learning, but we all have experiences and learning to share. I welcome you to listen and provide your own commentary in the thread below. If you like what you hear, subscribe to our channel and see all the recordings in the Lifestyle Architect series. And now, let's jump into this week's episode. Hi, Wealthy Wise Women. It's January, and we're going to be talking about cryptocurrencies and blockchain this month. If you had been around in the late 1990s, you will have remembered the advent of computing in the home and the internet. And there are many companies today that are household names that just started in those days. Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, a few that started and then disappeared, like AOL and Netscape, which were both replaced by Google eventually. The point is that was a technology that changed how we lived. And I believe that the blockchain and cryptocurrency world and asset class is going to change our world as well. We're already seeing the changes every single day. The financial world around the globe has been damaged ever since 2008 in the financial crisis. It has been on life support, and governments have been doing everything they can to prop it up. And quite honestly, that is why we have a blockchain technology. So I'm going to give you a little bit of history about this asset, where it comes from. I don't want to get into very much detail. I'm going to have to be really careful. I come from a technology background, and this is a technology topic. And so I can fall into that trap of getting into the weeds with this, but I'm going to try very hard to stay up in the generalities so that you can just get a feel for this asset, what it does, and why you should be interested in it. So with that, I'm going to give you just a brief history. So blockchain, actually, our knowledge of it started as cryptocurrency, and specifically Bitcoin. Bitcoin was a technology, a software technology that was built by an anonymous person as a result of the 2008 crash. That person or maybe a team, we don't know, and now there's all kinds of speculation about who Satoshi Nakamoto is or was. But the idea behind it was that the governments were destroying the financial systems, and a new financial digital system that could work for the future was needed. And it was needed to be based on something that had proven itself to be a reliable standard of value and stability for eons. And that, as you know, if you followed the recordings last month, was gold. Gold has set the standard for financial systems. It is the financial base for all governments, for all banks. That is what they pin their value to, because gold has some very specific characteristics that allows it to be the standard. So when Satoshi put Bitcoin together, it was with the idea of having a digital representation of gold and reflecting the same characteristics that gold has. One of those characteristics is that there is a cost to the development, a cost in time and money, resources, to finding the next ounce of gold. And so he needed to emulate that. And so what he did is the software actually does very complicated math calculations. And to pin that to technology, what he did is every transaction, every calculation to get to the next Bitcoin requires more technology and more resources, in the case of Bitcoin, in the form of electricity to run the technology to do the calculation. It needs to increase in cost over time. And so you see it way back when Bitcoin started in the early days, 2007, 2008. It was so simple, the calculations, that people could do it as a background application on their computer. While they were doing other things on their computer, this thing was running in the background. It was completing calculations and spitting out Bitcoin. And each Bitcoin would be similar to the spitting out of a gold nugget out of the mountain. At the beginning, of course, it had very little value, and so they received quite a few of them every time they accomplished the task. And then the task would be authorized and validated by everyone else on the network. And that is one of the things that makes the whole blockchain system work, is this idea that a transaction is first performed, then it is approved and validated by everyone on the network to say, yes, that is a valid transaction. And when 51% of all of the participants on the network agree, and it's not a human making agreement, these are the software tools that between the computers agreeing that the technology, or that the transaction is valid, then it is written to the record and it is approved. And once it's written to the record, it's immutable. There is no losing it, changing it, deleting it. It is there, and it's there forever. It cannot be removed. That is the power of the system. And that is the actual genius of the whole blockchain environment. Now, when it started with Bitcoin, Bitcoin was seen as a way to create a currency that reflected the power of gold, so that the digital world could be pinned to it as the standard for the environment. And quite honestly, even though in the early days, most people said, oh, Bitcoin's going to become the new currency for the world, it is not truly effective as a currency of daily transaction for the world, because it has another characteristic, and that is that it is capped at 21 million Bitcoin. And in a world that's forever growing and expanding, having a cap of 21 million, although it can survive, it becomes very, very slow and difficult to manage. So in very much like trying to do a transaction to buy coffee with a piece of gold. It's just that there's so much value packed into a small single unit that to break it down for day-to-day use is not practical. It can be done, but it's not practical. And so Bitcoin has, over the last decade or so, actually found its way to a position where it is seen and utilized as a standard for the platform, for the technology, in the same way that gold is. And so it's met its goal. Today, 18 million of them have already been mined. As the technology has grown and more Bitcoin have come out, the value of them have gone up as we have seen adoption by people and now businesses. And then last year by banks, which was the real trigger that moved it out of the $1,000 and $2,000 level and up into the $50,000 and $60,000 level. When big business and big banking stepped in and said, we recognize Bitcoin as an actual asset that we can use as a store of value, that's what gave final proof of concept and final adoption acceptance for Bitcoin. So anyone that's telling you that Bitcoin is just a fad and it's going away have missed the fact that once the banking systems stepped into it, they made it viable. The problem now, though, is that if you didn't buy your Bitcoin before the banks got in, you missed the opportunity that would have changed your life. Today, it's already to a level where it has made that massive leap. It happened last year. It was already moving there. It was up and down. It's very volatile as an asset class. But last year was when it moved into that state. And it's, even though it's still very volatile and it can run anywhere between 40,000 and 70,000 within a few months, up and down, it's still going to always have value. And over time, as the rest of them, of the Bitcoin are mined out, they are going to just finally eventually solidify, and there will be a base standard value that it will represent. So if you have the money, there's still value for a long-term play in Bitcoin if you can buy enough that kind of makes it worth the effort. The real value and the real opportunity for us is not in Bitcoin anymore. It's in other assets that have been created in that environment. So a couple of years after Bitcoin was created and it started to take off, there was a fellow, he's not anonymous, he's very visible actually. His name is Vitalik Buterin. He is a Canadian, Russian descent, Canadian, very wizardly in his computing. And he looked at what Satoshi had done and created and went, oh my goodness, the true value behind this is not Bitcoin and not currency. The true value behind this is that it is a platform where you make a decision and a contract with someone else, and you solidify that contract in a software transaction. And when that transaction is performed, it can only be performed in the way that it was agreed to through the contract, which means that you get away from all of the worries of having to have people to confirm your relationships with other people under contract. So think about today when the perfect example is a real estate transaction. In a real estate transaction, you will have a property that you want to sell. You have to have a title that you can prove that you own it. If you want to buy something, then you need to find the property that you want to buy. You need to validate that the owner who says that they're selling it is the actual owner. And so there is a title operation that you have to go through to validate the title. There is the contract of what's included, what's not included, what's the shape of the product that we're exchanging, all the aspects that would go into a contract. If you don't get every single little detail, then there's always a loophole to get out of the contract if the other person is not fully honest with you. And so how do you protect yourself? You bring in lawyers and you bring in realtors and you bring in all of these layers of middleman processes to ensure that the person you've created this contract with are actually going to live up to their end of the deal. When you put your contract into a computer software environment, A computer can only do exactly what you tell it to do. Now, this means a lot of work up front because you have to be able to describe very small, minute detail exactly what the transaction is going to look like. Who is going to do what, at what time, and what day, and at what quality. And when it's been confirmed that that part of the process is complete, then an action happens. And each stage in the contract process then goes through that validating, do an action, validate that it's complete, close out the action, move to the next step. It takes a while to get it set up, but once it's set up, you don't need anyone else to be involved in the transaction because the next step can't happen until everything that was agreed to has been complete. So the software becomes your middleman, except for the software doesn't charge you every time it looks at itself. It just sits there and waits. When Buterin realized the power of that, he realized this is something that could apply to every business transaction that we do in the world. And so he went about saying, how do I take that idea, create a platform where companies can actually build contracts that they then sell their services and products to others using that contract. And to manage the transaction, they would create a token. So where we have Bitcoin having coins under this other platform, which is called Ethereum, everyone has a token. And by having a token, you buy the tokens, and the tokens are then used as a way to purchase the product or service and enter into the contract with the company. At this point, about 99% of all companies that have moved to the blockchain to set up contract activities using that technology are actually operating on the Ethereum platform. Now, what's interesting with the Ethereum platform, the problem that it has is that it was also set up in the same way Bitcoin was, which is this proof of work, where you running a calculation, running a process, and there's a charge for that process. Every time a transaction goes through, there's a transaction fee that is paid to all of the people that own the computers that validate that that transaction is a valid transaction. So that's a cost to the user of the platform. And there is a cost for the power that it takes to run that transaction, actual resource cost in electricity, in people's time to operate the process, etc. It is a business. And so because it is a very early technology, it's kind of kludgy and it's very slow. And for that reason, it's very expensive. And so as people built into that technology, others saw the value of it and went, we can write software that does the same thing, but we can do it better. We can make it faster. We're going to niche into one idea and not try to be the platform for everybody. And so other products started to come up. And they were also selling opportunities for people to come in and help build their platform, their network, by selling their tokens that people could operate on. These are much smaller companies, and these we call altcoins. Anybody that's not a Bitcoin is considered an alternate coin, even Ethereum. Now, Ethereum, over time, because it was the first, because it created the idea and big people got in with it, it's also moved quite a bit over the years. Not like Bitcoin, where Bitcoin's gone to 60,000. Ethereum is now around 4,000 per token. But all the little altcoins that are doing niche activities within that space you can get them anywhere from a tiny fraction of a penny per token to maybe a couple $100 per token. And so, and how they grow in price is they have a compelling idea. People want to invest in them. It's very, very speculative. It's people looking at the idea, looking at the people behind the idea and going, this is something that could really be part of the infrastructure of this new technology. Think it's like investing in Cisco, the guys that built the routers and the hardware that go into supporting your computer system, all these bits and pieces of technology that you plugged in the old days. That's what these companies are like. They connect the various pieces to each other. So when you learn, so it is a very technical thing. And if you're not a technical person, you can get buried in all of those things. I am not recommending that you do that unless you're already a technical person and you just really are excited about doing technology. It is not necessary for you to understand the nuts and bolts to be able to figure out how to invest. And one of the things that we go through in my program is talking about what are the different kinds of speculations. How do you do this safely without losing the farm on it? And how can you really position yourself to make big money with just $100 here, $100 there, and then just some time to let it grow? So that is sort of the background of what that technology is, how it works, how there are multiple assets within that asset class, and how they can range in price from a tiny fraction of a penny all the way up to $60,000. Mostly that has to do with time, but it also has to do with the best ideas being used to provide the best solutions to a world that is going very digital. So that's as far as I'm going to go for this week. This is the history lesson, and it's really just to give you context. For the rest of the month, I'm going to talk about the new things that have developed over the last 2 years as bankers have gotten into this game, because what has made this a viable asset class is that the blockchain is completely replacing the financial infrastructures of the world. And it will take a while for us to completely move away from the old technologies, but everything is going faster than it ever has before. And what used to take a full generation for a transition to make is happening in a matter of a few years. So before the end of this decade, we can expect that money, currency, will be completely gone in the world. It's almost gone now. We rarely use money to make transactions today, physical money. We live in a world of credit cards, debit cards, automatic transfers, auto deposits, auto withdrawals. Everything is already digitized. The way it's digitized today is in a centralized structure where it all is controlled by one small group of bankers under the world reserve and the governments that control it, particularly through the American fiat dollar. And the power that that's made has been what created the need for an alternative. When we go to this new platform, no one person, no one company, no one government, no one anything can take full control of the platform. It is truly decentralized, and our safety comes in its decentralization. Every node on a network has the full picture of all transactions for that asset across the world. So even if even if a whole country shut down all of its nodes for the Bitcoin, let's say, it wouldn't have any impact on the operation of the Bitcoin network and the money asset that people hold in that network, because it doesn't matter if China goes off the system, then when you go to log in to find your Bitcoin, you just go through some other country to get to it, or you do it from your own country. But that's the point. If your country shuts down, it's irrelevant. You just get access through another country. And this is something that governments have taken a really hard time to understand. China's tried to shut down Bitcoin 3 times, and it's never happened. Other countries like America have tried to use social programming to get people so afraid of it that it would not take off. That didn't work either. The fact is that our freedoms and the way that we can take back control of our money and our rights is by being decentralized and not having one entity or a small group of entities controlling our most important asset, which is the money that we use for trade. So with that, I will try one more time to finish for today. With that, I'm going to let you go. Next week, we will talk about a little bit more about Ethereum and why that is an excellent asset to be buying right now. It's a very important time for it right now. And some of the other assets like it that are sort of the picks and shovels, the nuts and bolts of the blockchain infrastructure. We'll talk about that so you can understand it. We'll look at what some of those assets are that you might want to go and investigate. After that, I'm going to talk about how we are bringing all of the tools that we see as investing tools that are in the old world, how that has now gotten migrated onto the blockchain infrastructure, where you used to be able to put your money into a bank and get 8%, and today you get nothing. You can go find an equivalent product in the blockchain where you put your money into it and it is collecting at 8%. So you can actually save yourself to a growth just like your grandparents did, that you can't do the way your grandparents did it, but you can get the results that your grandparents got. So we'll talk about that. And then our final episode is going to talk about some of the really cool off-the-wall things that are going on that show that blockchain is definitely going to be the base of not only our financial world, but the experience of living that is coming down the road towards us. We are, by the end of this decade, going to look so different. It will be like the change. It will be probably 10 times the change of what it looks like between what it was before internet to today. Take that and multiply that change by 10, and that's what we're probably going to be seeing in 2030. We will not recognize the world by the time we get there. There's scary things to that. There's exciting things to that. But we'll talk about that in our last week, and how, as investors, you actually get to be part of investing in that. And you're not going to just watch from the sidelines. So with that, thank you. We will talk to you next week. And until then, remember, your future is what you create. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye.